Hi everyone, thanks for taking the time to participate today and or watching the recording in the future. I'm Jeff Nee from the Museum and Informal Education Alliance, and I'll be guiding you through this Blender Intermediate workshop. We're on slide number 1. For the disclaimer, while I do work at NASA, this is not a NASA presentation, and any opinions I express are my own and don't necessarily reflect the views of NASA. Also, unless otherwise stated, none of the files I'm showcasing are official NASA products. They're all based on NASA content, of course, but it's all just material I've developed for my own dome. And if you find it useful, I'm more than happy to share it. All right, the first thing, of course, is to acknowledge that everyone is going to be at a different level. Even if you started with us at the primer workshop, some people will practice more, some less, some not at all. And the point is not to worry about where other people are. We're all just here right now to spend some dedicated time to explore and learn together. That's the point. I did my best to make this workshop very self-paced. With that said, let's go ahead and move on to slide number 2. So for anyone who attended or watched the recording for the primer workshop last time, I'd like to spend just a few minutes to answer some questions that might have come up from your own explorations since then. Here's a review slide of what we had covered. Remember that Blender has the ability to essentially make anything you can imagine into reality. That's figuratively, of course, since it's all virtual, but I should point out also literally, because if you consider applications such as 3D printing, you can literally take whatever you imagine in your head and make it a reality. And of course, that's not even mentioning that people can indeed make an actual career out of Blender, generating real income from their digital creations. And this is extra true for planetariums, right? Since the content you create for your domes would be presumably connected directly to your dome's revenue, right? So if you make something great and people love seeing it, they'll come in and you'll actually get more money. So it's a real thing. That's why I like to call this one blending reality. Okay, so I do want to just take a few minutes for any questions about any of the topics on this slide.
I'll ask a question. This is
Yes,
Rosemary.
please.
I haven't completely caught up, and one of my questions is what's relevant to what I want to do. I see UV editing on there, and I think today you're talking about textures, so I'm not quite sure what you covered last time. And also video auditing, editing. Is that today or was that last time?
That was last time. So UV editing, last time we covered it super basically, right? It's just what it is. Here's the workspace to do it. So if you have a specific question on that, I probably didn't cover it because honestly, we went through so much that last hour. I'm pretty sure that whatever question you have, I didn't answer. So if you have a specific question about UV editing, now would be the time to do that. And same thing with video and audio editing. We're going to cover that a little bit here, but again, that was just the basics of what it is and how to do it and how to get there in Blender at the very least.
I don't have specific questions.
Okay.
I'll wait until the end. I think you're doing UV mapping today. Is that correct?
There's a little bit of UV mapping today, yes.
Okay.
There's a little bit of that.
I had to look up what UV was because,
Yeah.
of course, in
No, so did
astronomy,
I.
it means something else.
Definitely. Yeah, I had to look it up myself too.
Yeah.
Because I'd been using the term for so long, but I had never needed to know what it meant before I was teaching it. I mean, this is one of the things, right? When you're teaching something, it helps you learn it better. So I'm learning as I'm teaching you all as well. So
what does UV stand for?
UV, it's a coordinate system. So there's XYZ, there's XYZ coordinates, obviously, but UV is the 2D coordinates on a 3D surface.
Oh.
Does that kind of make sense?
They don't want to make it another X and Y.
Exactly. So XY is the 3D coordinates of the actual model, right? But on the surface of the model, it would be UV. You can think of it like latitude and longitude on the Earth, right? So the Earth has XYZ coordinates in space, but we also have latitude and longitude on the surface of the Earth.
It's a great explanation, Jeff.
Oh, thank you.
I have one other technical non sequitur question. What version of Blender are you going to be showing?
Yeah, the latest one is
okay,
2.9. What is it? I don't even remember anymore.
But that's
But
the one they recently redid the user interface to a great degree. It's quite different. So I was curious.
So I made sure to put in the description of this one that you should just be using the latest one always. You know,
Great.
someone had pointed out to me that, you know, even if the changes don't seem that big from version to version, right? There are always back-end performance tweaks that they do, right? They always do back-end performance tweaks, so things will work a little bit faster, a little smoother, it'll render a little faster from version to version. So that's just something to keep in mind.
It's version 2.93.6.
Yeah. And I hear, you know, just in case you guys are wondering, I hear that version 3 is going to be another great advancement, like a great quantum leap in terms of interfaces and abilities. So I'm looking forward to that myself. And if you wanted to try it, if you ever get super advanced, I don't think I would ever get to this level, but if you ever wanted to, they do release the, you know, kind of the alpha versions. So if you wanted to try 3.0, you can certainly do that now. They make that available. Let's go ahead and move on to slide number 3. Having a concrete vision of goals or an end product really does drive learning and exploration in ways that nothing else can. So yay for project-based learning. So our first project is handling fulldome and 360 media. And I put this first only because this is the #1 thing that I personally do with Blender. So we'll be importing media and doing some basic manipulation. Firstly, I hope you've already downloaded and unzipped the blend file. Okay, that zip file should have everything you need to get started. This slide 3 is what you should see when you first open it up. And so once you have it open, just feel free to just start poking around and experimenting. If you ever feel like you've completely broken it, always feel free to just delete it and unzip the file or download it again. It's a file that I created myself to help me convert to and from 360 video, and I hope you'll find it useful too, if only for this practice session.
If we already have Blender open, do we import it or do we just
No,
click
you
on
just
it?
open it. You just
Okay.
so the zip file has a dot. So blend files are .blend. That's the extension. So you just double click on the blend file, and it should open up inside Blender right now. And you should see something like this. Slide number 3 again. So as an example, you can take dome masters and convert them into an interactive 360 video that you can post on your social media, Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, whatever you have. And that's a great, yeah, go ahead.
Excuse me again, but what do you mean by interactive?
Yeah, that means that they'll actually be able to pan around and look around at the different parts of your video, just like if they were sitting in your dome.
Oh, so like the ones on YouTube or other
Yes.
places where that you wouldn't use that in the dome, you would use something else, right?
Yeah, so this
like
one,
a 360.
yeah, so this one is, this particular file converts from full dome, say a dome master if you have a full dome show, into 360 if you wanted to upload your shows in an interactive way to YouTube, say, or to Vimeo, or to wherever.
The 360 image or video that I would show in my planetarium, when people say 360 image, it's the same format you're talking about that you can make this interactive panorama out of once you have a 360 image?
There are a lot of layers to that question, so
Okay.
let me take them one at a time. So there are many different formats for 360 video. There are many different ways to warp it, I guess you would say. This one, in this particular blend file that I'm sharing in slide number 3, is going to take a full dome master and convert it into an equirectangular, that's the technical term, 360 video that is uploadable to an online video service. And if you configure it correctly, which we'll go into in the next slide, it will actually show up properly, and people can pan around and actually look around just as if they were looking at your dome. So this Blender file also has components to let you go the other way. So if you wanted to take a 360 and, for whatever reason, someone did ask me this one time, convert it into a full dome, like cut it in half and convert it into full dome, right? Most systems today, most planetarium systems today, should be able to play the equirectangular 360 just by itself. But, again, someone did ask, and I was like, okay, well, here's how you cut it in half and show it as a full dome master, right? So you can do that with this file as well. And
Full
so,
dome means
Mhm.
180,
yes,
right?
180,
As opposed
yes.
to 360. So it's a half dome. I mean, a
Yes.
half sphere.
Yes, and what's really useful for this one in particular is you can also adjust the 360 sphere so that you can get a little bit more of the horizon than literally half, right? So you can get a little bit more of the horizon, see a little bit more of that land, and kind of just adjust it to fit your particular projection system, right? So that's the benefit of that. And we're all used to working with full dome masters anyway, so if you don't feel like messing with 360 stuff, you don't have to if you convert it. All right. So I wanted to mention a couple highlights on this one before I move on. It's basically just two hemispheres that I made, one top and one bottom. I did add labels if you're interested in those, if you want to poke around and see how I did those. And in terms of putting your own content onto this hemisphere, in the shader editor at the bottom, there's a little image texture tab, and you just click on that and you'll get to slide number 4, which will open up a file folder window. And after you click on that file folder, you can navigate around your own computer and select one or multiple images or even a video to put on that hemisphere. And if you don't already have a full dome image you want to try, in the presenter notes, I included a link to a sample full dome frame. It's from Eyes on Island Earth, which is a free NASA-funded planetarium show that the Bishop Museum developed. So, I should also mention that if you want an image sequence, if you want multiple images to show up, say if you have a folder of dome masters, the keyboard shortcut to select all the files in a single folder is A, the letter A. And you can also select a video to put on that hemisphere, but you do need to know the exact number of frames and the frame rate of that video at some point to play it properly. All right, slide number 5, if you're following along. If you select a series of images, you get more options to select how many frames to show, the start frame, whether you want to play in a loop, and auto refresh, which I totally recommend so you can actually see what's going on at any given time. And from there, you can simply render it out. And it's of course going to take a long time depending on how many frames you have, so I'm not going to expect you to do that now. I did also want to mention that I did set this one with specific render and output settings that I personally like that work for my dome, and you can obviously feel free to adjust it for your dome. Now, if you do intend to upload this somewhere to share it, you're going to need slide number 6. Slide number 6 shows you screenshots of a particular tool to quote-unquote inject metadata to make a video display properly online. If you don't do this step, YouTube will just show the weird warped equirectangular version, and nobody will know what's going on. So this is a necessary step if indeed you do want to be uploading content. And that QR code, the link is in the presenter notes, takes you to a specific video that I've created using Blender. I think it's a Mars panorama. But that one I created specifically in Blender. I outputted it, I rendered all the frames that I wanted, and I even injected the metadata before I sent it to the team to upload. So there you go. All right, slide number 7. Now it's time for some free exploration and questions about this specifically. For those who are slightly more advanced, I did stick in a few extras, like I said, if you want to play with them in the outliner area. Specifically, I added objects to convert the other way from 360 full dome. It's a simple mesh plane that I warped into a sphere. I personally like that better than using the regular, they call it a UV sphere. There's a couple things that mess up at the poles if you just use the regular UV sphere. So this method of taking a plane, just a regular plane, and actually bending it and warping it into a spherical shape, I find it works better. There's also an 180 fisheye camera, like we were saying, Rosemary. Most people won't need that since, again, your dome should be able to take 360 media and put it into your dome directly without having to do this. But again, some people have asked, and so I provided that just because. A note for 360 spheres, like I said, always keep an eye on your north and south poles. Even the plane method isn't perfect sometimes, and they can have problems, especially if you plan on focusing on them during a show. I'll show you that later. My backup slides, if you want to skip ahead for yourself, have suggested workarounds if you're interested. And I also did want to point out a slightly advanced tip, which is the percentage resolution option. It's a quick way to just lower your render resolution for testing. I highly, highly encourage people to do test renders at lower resolutions. Practically every time that I don't do a test render, I've regretted it. Because there's always some sort of visual artifact or a strange color or some weird seam or some other quirk that I miss on the first pass, which means that I have to start over the whole render again. And so rendering a test at, say, 25% saves you a lot of time in the long run. Again, as a frame of reference, rendering a 4K or 8K frame takes only about 5-ish to 10 seconds, depending on your system. But a 30-minute planetarium show has, again, at least 50,000 frames. So that could be a solid week of rendering. And I have this Blender file set to output an MP4 for you. But for huge renders like that, I suggest that you render out the individual PNG frames, the individual image frames, just to make sure you have the hard drive space, obviously. Rendering out the individual frames means you can start and stop at any time, and your Blender can even crash without losing all your past work. Oh, I should also mention that you'll likely want to be rendering on your strongest computer, which is likely the computer that's running your dome. And so you can stop the render at any time while you're doing shows, say, and then start it again after your shows are done. And that way you can just have that be running all the time and be done that much sooner. And of course, if you have multiple render computers, go ahead and split all the frames between all of them, make your own little render farm, and you'll be done in no time. For the bigger planetariums out there, they have 5 render systems, right? One for each section of the dome. And if you have a 50,000 frame planetarium show, then that'll be done in 1 day instead of 5 days. Right?
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
Could you, this is a request, could, even though you said that that's an advanced thing, it's not really advanced since you highly recommend it, to change the resolution of the, of output to something lower so it renders faster. Could you switch over to your Blender and very slowly go through the steps of what it would take to do that?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking, Alan. And I only
so
say
that we
it's
can
advanced.
watch your, see where your cursor is and everything.
Thanks for asking. So I only say it's advanced because you don't need to do it. It's a time saver. That's all. So that's why I call it an advanced tip. Right. So I'm on my live Blender now. You should be able to see it, I hope. You can see my mouse, maybe.
Yes, don't move it fast.
Don't move it fast. Okay. Where I was highlighting was right here, the Properties tab that I had mentioned in the primer workshop. And there are all these tabs, if you remember, okay, that you can click on. They all do different things. But the one that you want is this one, the one that looks like a little printer. All right, it's called the Output Properties. And this is where you can set all your dimensions, your resolution and everything. The percentage resolution one is right here. Click on it, just type 25. And now you'll render at 25%. And it's also non-linear too. So rendering at 25% will actually take less than a quarter of the time.
That clarified everything for me.
Thank you for asking again. Okay, and when you're done and ready for your final render, just don't forget to reset it to 100%. Because that would be sad too.
When I change mine to 25% and hit enter, it goes back to 100%. So This is on one of the full dome example I pulled up.
So if you type 25%, hit enter.
Yeah.
And it goes back to 100%.
Yep.
Interesting. Can you click
don't
and
worry
drag?
about it.
No, that's fine. Can you click and drag? You can also click and drag.
What would I drag?
Just left and right. So click on the 100. Click on the 100, hold it down, click and hold, and then you can drag left and right. Does that work, Rosemary?
No, but don't worry about it.
Would you like to share your screen and show us exactly what you mean? That's fine. So if you go to 100, just show me what you mean, and just type 25. Hit enter. Interesting.
Don't enter the percent symbol. I think that's confusing it.
Percent.
Just type in 25. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. See? This is why we have a community.
There we go.
There you go. But yeah, so other people have that question, Rosemary. Just because I didn't think of it, other people had that question. Wonderful. Okay. All right, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Any other quick questions before I...
Yeah, Jeff, can you just briefly describe what your system is? So is it I just noticed that your resolution is a 4K sphere.
Oh, that's just because, I mean, you can set the resolution to whatever you want, right? So if you have in fact, interesting side note, Blender can do math, right? So you can divide by 2. If you saw that, I don't know if you saw that, but now it's 4K by 4K, right? Oh, and this, I should mention that this is set to an equirectangular. So 8192 by 4096 is the equirectangular 2:1 resolution, obviously not a full dome resolution, right? Which is supposed to be square.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, my resolution is only 1600 because I run a portable.
Oh, okay.
Even if your projector isn't that high resolution, as long as your system can handle it, I still like running higher resolution imagery. Every little bit helps. I think that's my philosophy anyway. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
I was just trying to match up what you were showing in your blend file to what you actually run on the domes.
I mentioned this last time too, of one of the reasons why I really like Blender, even for video editing, is that Blender is very good at doing weird resolutions. That's not true for all the free software out there. There are some video editors that lock you into 1080p or 720p or whatever. Blender can do whatever you want. Like it's literally just a number to Blender. So yeah. So if you have some custom build, then Blender it could be really helpful for you. Okay.
Jeff, I have a question.
Yeah.
On your Zoom on your screen right now, there's the word south, and then below and to the right there are those 2 little circles. Could you explain what that is?
You know, I will be totally honest and say I'm not 100% sure what the second one is for. I can say that the first one, it has to do with how filmmakers make and import digital assets. For example, the mirror ball, the little one that looks like a mirror ball, then if I turn around, you can actually see like a background that seems to be warping. They literally used to need to bring a mirror ball to film locations and actually take that data and import it into their CGI effects. And it's to help your effects be more realistic in terms of reflecting light in a scene. Because that data is somehow, again, I can't pretend to be fully understanding this concept, but the data that the computer takes from the reflected ball can translate into more realistic reflections. Does that at least kind of answer your question?
It kind of does.
Okay, that's kind of what this ball is for, and this only shows up in the shader editor. You might notice. For example, in the layout, it's not there. If I go to animation, it's not there. None of the other ones show it, only in shading. And again, it's because you can actually import reflective data to your scene. I'm going to switch to slide 8 now. We're now going to actually talk about 3D models. Most people would have put this first in Blender, in a Blender workshop. But again, that's not really what I do most of the time in my dome, because honestly, my Planetarium system already has so many 3D models that I can use. And vendors and user groups are releasing more models all the time. So I don't usually have to go in and make or change a model myself. These are just two examples where I actually did want to go in and tweak stuff myself for one reason or another. This one I'm showing you right now is the south pole of the moon. It's the actual terrain taken from NASA data. And if you are paying attention to NASA at all, this right here is the ultimate target for the new Artemis missions back to the moon. We want to send people to the south pole of the moon. And so this area is going to be super, super important in the coming years. Here, just remember that if you want to see the shadows of the moon, you'll need to be a rendered view. And I also did set up an ambient light that you can turn on and off once you're in rendered view. And you can also adjust the strength of the digital elevation map, or they call it a DEM in the modifier properties. And then I set it so that you can fade the labels on and off in the shader area. So if you are working with this, I highlighted all the areas that I just talked about. So here's the live one. So this right here, if you remember, there's the wireframe, the solid, the materials, the viewport shading, and then here's the rendered view that can actually show the lighting. So I don't want to say my best, but I did my best within the time that I had, if that makes sense, to make it as accurate as possible. So I did all the math and everything. This is full scale. That's the rendered view. That's the shading and the lighting. If you want to turn on the ambient light, that's the ambient light, and you can make it stronger or weaker as you like. Here, again, this is the properties section, the properties area. The little wrench is the modifiers. And then the way that I did this is that it's just a plane. It's a regular plane. I subdivided it a whole bunch of times. In fact, if I do edit mode, you can see how many times I subdivided it. Not that many. But I did also add a subdivision modifier, which means that it just breaks it up into more parts to make the resolution of the terrain higher. Underneath the subdivision modifier, I did a simple displacement modifier. And I actually grabbed this data. NASA releases this kind of data all the time. And literally the hardest part about this is finding the data. You add it to this displacement modifier. And here, watch this, is the strength. And you can do it, just click it one time. And you can make the mountains higher. So at this point, it's unrealistic, right? It's not realistic. But there are certain uses for exaggerating the height just a little bit. You can go at as high as you want, obviously. You can go, let's click it a bunch of times and see what happens, right? So that's totally unrealistic.
So Jeff,
right?
Why did you use the original value, that 0.116?
That's literally, I calculated it to be as accurate as I could be. That's literally the value that is accurate for this particular scale at this particular model. It was, I mean, not an onerous amount of math, but a decent amount of math. And remember, you can always revert. I'm just going to restart it. So remember, you can always file, revert. Just don't save it. Because if you look at it, really, this is supposed to be the size of Texas. It's not supposed to be very, very, very high. In fact, this particular image that I grabbed says that it's 7,000 meters high. So that mountain is 7,000 meters high. And the low point, which is the purple, is negative 7,000 meters low. So that's basically, I think what is Everest, like 8,000 meters? I can't remember. But it's basically one Mount Everest high and one Mount Everest low, give or take.
In terms of planetarium world, this is akin to the fact to how we make the moon look bigger in the sky to make it look more realistic.
Yeah. So there are uses for exaggerating the heights a little bit. And you can do that easily here just with that strength modifier. Now we're on slide number 9. And I did want to show you one advanced tip while people are literally walking around the moon. Okay. And that's the walk navigation. I spent so long in Blender not knowing this existed and wishing it existed. And when I finally found out that it was real, it was a joy, let me tell you. Okay, so you can actually walk around your models in real time, and you can even carry a camera with you if you want to be a camera person and make animations that way. But it makes it so much easier to navigate, especially big models like this one. So in the view menu, under navigation, there's literally just one option that says walk navigation, and that just lets you use WASD for any computer gamers out there. W for forward, S for backwards, A for left, D for right, and you can look around with the mouse and it'll let you move around as if you were walking around the model. And of course, because this one is full scale, if you try it right now as it is, you might not actually go anywhere because it's set to walk at a certain number of meters per second, right? But if you're walking around the moon, it may not do that much right away. So you have to scroll up on your mouse. So scroll up on your mouse and it'll make you walk faster and faster and faster and faster until you finally get it to the speed that you want. And scrolling down makes you go slower. So I'm back in Live Blender now, and I'm going to do View, Navigation, Walk Navigation, and you'll see my mouse actually controls where I'm looking now. Now I'm going to hit W, and I'm going to hold it down, but it's not going anywhere because I'm going really slowly. So I'm holding down W, and now I'm scrolling up. Because this is full scale, it's going to scroll up a lot. But now you can see I'm starting to really move in here. And now I'm moving like super fast. I'm moving supersonic at this point in real scale. And if I scroll down, scrolling down makes me go slower and slower and slower. And if I go back, I'm going backwards now. S for backwards. And now I'm just moving around. Now I'm flying. And I can look around, I can move around. Again, I can carry a camera with me at some point. I can walk into a crater. And look out. And I can climb this mountain. And look around at the moon. So pretty cool stuff. And I would say that this isn't that useful for domes per se, but it is fun. And it's really helpful if you're trying to fine-tune a particular model. All right.
Jeff, I'm noticing that the background, the space behind, it seems to be connected to that little circle in front.
Yes, yes. So that's just a placeholder. That's not what people actually see. So if you want to see what people actually will see in this model, the rendered view. So I did actually make the space black for this one. Not that it matters, because again, what I'm going to do with this one, actually, Alan, this is pertinent to you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this model, I'm going to import it into my dome, and I'm going to use it for the moons of the solar system flying. So we're going to fly around the South Pole and moons of the solar system. So
that's great.
Look forward to that.
Could you say a little bit more about how you use the output from this in your dome?
Yes. So when you take this, you can export it into a file format that your dome likes. So I don't remember what kind of system you have, Rosemary. I think it was a Digitalis. Was that right?
That's right.
Yeah. So so you can ask Kyle if you don't know, and I don't know either. You can ask Kyle or Carrie what file format does Digitalis like for 3D models. For mine, I like OBJ, especially for something as simple as this one. So you go to File, Export, OBJ. Once I click that, it'll actually make a 3D model that I can bring into my dome. And from there, I can place it wherever I want. I'm going to place it on the South Pole of the moon, obviously, for this one. But that's kind of it.
So it's not really a layer when you put it on the moon. It's actually more than that. It's just like any other 3D model. You're just placing it on the moon.
Yeah, it's like any 3D model. And the reason I want to do that is because actually, I wonder if Digitalis already has like a really detailed 3D moon that you can fly around. I'm not sure, but
yeah,
oh, they do. Okay, yeah, great. Then you don't even need this, right? But this process can be useful for any terrain data that NASA has. And in fact, you can actually use this for things like Google Maps data or any other any other DEM, any other digital elevation model in the whole solar system, in the whole universe. So for example, I made one about for Ceres. There was a great DEM that came out for Ceres and the dwarf planet, and you get to fly right into the Ocata crater. And I don't think any planetarium system has that yet, because it just came out like a few months ago. But I have it, so if you want it, let me know. All right.
Hey Jeff, could you say a little bit more about acquiring DEMs, because that's always been my downfall. Is one mission has them over here and one mission has them over here. There doesn't seem to be a clearinghouse or.
No, it's supposed to be the planetary data system. Do you know the PDS?
Yes.
Yeah, it's supposed to be that. Yeah. But honestly, like I said, the hardest part about this process is finding the data. So if you have trouble finding one, Kevin, just ask me and I'll see what I can hunt down for you.
Okay.
Yeah. If you have a specific body that you want. The moon one is super simple. It's on the SVS, if you know that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so it's right there. And the link should be in the presenter notes if you want the full data. Yeah. And for this one in particular, the reason I wanted to tweak it is because I wanted the South Pole. And if you remember, I was talking about how the poles get kind of weird sometimes. Mm-hmm. So I had to rotate this, take another 360, crop it to the South Pole. It was a whole production, but that's why I made this one in particular.
Okay.
Right. I do just want to move on real quickly for people who want to slide number 10, which is my version of the James Webb Space Telescope. As a reminder, this is not a NASA product. It's something that I made myself for my own dome. You're happy to use it if you want, but don't tell people that it's 100% accurate. Don't tell people that you got it, that it's a NASA branded thing or anything. It's not. Okay, so it's just something that I was playing with, and I just eyeballed it to be visually closer to what the newest mission animations are. So again, links are in the presenter notes. There are two things that I want to mention with this slide when you first open it up. In the shader editor at the bottom, there are settings for metallic, specular, and roughness. Those three settings combine to determine the reflectivity of a surface. So they can make objects look like shiny mirrors, which is obviously very important for the Webb telescope, right? So I had to tweak that. And there's also, note for that Kapton foil-looking material, I added a bump vector. It's called a bump vector node to make the surfaces bumpy and visually more interesting and make it look more like the foily type of stuff that it is. So that's all I wanted to mention about that. And then slide number 11, if you have a very complex model, and this, appropriately, this is the most complex spacecraft model that I've ever worked with. And the basic model was all just in one piece. So I found it very useful to take it and just break it up into pieces while I was, customizing it for myself. And in case you were ever wondering why anyone would want to use wireframe view lets you make selections through the entirety of a model. So if you don't use wireframe view, you're only able to make selections on the very top surface of whatever is visible to you at that moment. And so wireframe view lets you select everything throughout the model in your view. Just make sure you're in edit mode and make sure the object that you want to work with is actually selected in your outliner, because that's an annoyance that I found that happens sometimes. Okay. Oh, another useful tool when selecting portions of a model is the select menu to help you select just what you want. My personal favorite is a shortcut key called Control and L. It's select linked. That's what it's called, select linked. You simply select one piece of your model, then hit Control L, and it selects all the other pieces that are linked together in your chosen piece. It can be very hit or miss, but it can still save you a lot of time and frustration when you're working with a really complex model like this. And of course, finally, you can separate out your selections to make it easier to customize. That's in the Mesh Separate menu. Slide number 12, you probably aren't new to the concept of parenting objects to one another, so you can do that in Blender. And if you do separate out pieces from a complex model, I always like to parent it back to the main model, just so that if I ever do want to move this around, it won't break it. I know that was all really fast, But, you know, these files are here for you to play with forever, basically. Alan, which part do you want me to show you? Yeah, sure, parenting, sure. Yeah, we can do parenting. What you do to parent something, let's say I wanted to parent the dish, which is this little bit right here. Another little quick shortcut is if you have a number pad on your keyboard, the period on your number pad. Hitting period on your number pad lets you center whatever object you're selecting right now. So that's super easy. So this is the little dish. So I wanted to parent this little dish cover to this object, which is the main antenna. Click the child first, select the child first, then you click Control, click the parent, and then it's object, parent. Now I just wanted to mention this. I actually didn't even make a file for this, but I did want to mention slide number 13 and 14 because those are kind of my last slides, so 13 and 14. So on slide number 13 right now, if you're video editing in Blender. The main example, as we mentioned in the first activity, is if you rendered out your full dome show as frames, but then you want to upload it somewhere as an immersive 360 video online or something. So I don't have a Blender file to share because this one, it would be like 50 gigabytes large, and I don't want to make people download that unless they really want it. If you're curious, this is from that free planetarium show from the Bishop Museum that I had mentioned, and you're welcome to get it. Link is in the presenter notes. Two things I wanted to highlight here. You can see the codec settings that work for my dome, the video codec settings that work for my dome. That's just what works for my dome. Yours is going to be different, probably. And I also wanted to point out the proxy view settings, which can significantly speed up Blender as you're editing video. And then slide 14 really quickly is the last of my project slides if you're doing video editing. Again, I wanted to highlight the dimensions section in the properties area. And I also wanted to highlight the add menu, which has all sorts of effects, such as fading. You can speed up, you can slow down, you can add layers, you can add masks. You can do a whole bunch of stuff with video editing in Blender. Again, it's not something that I use very often, but it's there if you ever feel like just having some fun with video editing. One example that I saw a planetarium do, they made a 360 immersive video of one of their dome shows. They uploaded it online, but before they did that, they videotaped one of their presenters walking around their dome, their virtual dome, and kind of like literally pointing out to things in the sky. And that's how they did it. They did one layer of just the sphere in their video editing, and they did one layer of the video of the person doing the talk, right? So that's one fun thing. And of course, what's next? Go and create something for your own dome. Whether you do a 360, that's Enceladus. That data set came out a little while ago. The bottom left is SMAP, S-M-A-P, which is a great Earth science mission if you're into Earth science. And the last thing I want to mention is, of course, the team chat is here if you want to just chat about Blender at any time. It's all up to you. We're here for you. And then thanks.